Yo, what up? It's Donut, and you tuning into all your Illuminati news. And I am so excited. I got two special guests, Courtenay Turner and Isaac Weishaupt, who I'm such big fans of. You're going to love this episode. We're going to go into what is the occult technocracy really running stuff. I think you're going to absolutely love it.
This is a massive topic, this dark enlightenment thing, and I can't see a possible realm where Courtenay, is it Courtenay? Am I saying that correctly?
I'm saying it wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay. But yeah, it's spelled Courtenay, so people say that sometimes.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping that between the two of us, I would love to know if we could distill this topic down to one episode, because on my podcast it took me 5 episodes to go through sort of what my angle on it, and I've got my own biases, as we'll talk about today, and my own sort of worldviews and things, and I don't share a lot of those in common with everyone in the truther community, and that's actually, that's great. I think that with the more we can get together and discuss ideas from different points of view, we can maybe try to understand and unpack what seems to be happening, because I've been researching the occult since 2011, and to me, I see lots of strange portals and gateways opening symbolically and subconsciously and all this weird stuff. So I don't know if I'm just being paranoid and I've drank too much of my own Kool-Aid, or if there's something really changing in our world right now. So I'm excited you had us on here. So thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I think what's going on right now is pretty scary. So and I don't have the, I always make the joke that it took me really long time to wake up. I woke up in 2020. So I always make the joke that I was looking for the train station. Then I found the high-speed rail, and I've been like scrambling to try and catch up. So I'm definitely much newer to all of this, but I have a strong philosophy background. So that's kind of when, some of these movements start to surface, I can see the philosophical, underpinnings. So.
And this dark enlightenment, this is a philosophical movement. It seems like I'm not too educated on it. I just know some really, really wicked smart people I know enjoy learning about these philosophies, but they're not as conspiratorial minded as me. Everybody's on Twitter just tweeting out Isaac Weishaupt, Courtenay Turner, dark enlightenment, dark MAGA. Is there a connection to it? And I was like, I gotta know from both of y'all, and everybody go check out their websites. I got all those links down below. The dark enlightenment, this is a philosophy.
Do you want to start, or
I'll let you take it off. You got the philosophy background, and now I'm fascinated to hear what your take is on it. So I'll let you kind of start.
Well, yes, I would argue it is a philosophy. I do think it has some spiritual underpinnings as well. So I think there's overlap with, philosophy, religion, or maybe faith-based would be the way to word it. What's going on with the Dark Enlightenment kind of fuses a bunch of things, but, it was coined by Curtis Yarvin, who goes by Mencius Moldbug, which I thought was such a weird name that I had to look up what that was all about. And apparently Mencius comes from a Confucius philosopher. So he's definitely signaling to the, ancient Confucian Chinese philosopher. And then I'm not so sure about the mold bug, other than, just maybe the obvious, like mold and a bug. He was involved in tech. So bug is usually like a feature that goes haywire, right? That short circuits things. And so and based on his philosophy, he really does see things as moving towards this great reset, but not great reset in the way that we think of it in terms of the Klaus Schwab, WEF type of marketing, but more of a great reset in terms of underpinnings of technocracy, underpinnings of definitely like cameralism, Heideggerian kind of presuppositions, which I would argue are very Gnostic. So that's where kind of the religious underpinnings come into play. And then this whole accelerationism movement, which is a lot to unpack. but that was Nick Land and Sadie Plant, and they had their left accelerationists and their right accelerationists, and we can unpack that if you want. But essentially, I often see when there are these left-right variations of things that they're more of a Hegelian left-right rather than real schism, because their telos is shared, and the telos is ultimately that we're headed towards this destruction, so we just might as well speed it up. And Nick Land is a posthumanist, I would call him. So there's which is a subset of transhumanism, right? The transhumanists are people who believe in, and there are lots of various categories of transhumanists. So again, we can unpack all of that as well. It's a wide tent, but people are probably pretty familiar with people like Yuval Noah Harari, right? Who talks about how we're going to upload our consciousnness, even though he says we don't have any of that free will to think of the past. But, you know, the thing we don't have, that's the thing that's getting uploaded to the cloud. And we're going to, have surveillance go under the skin. This is really hearkening to synthetic biology, becoming cyborgs. Of course, Elon Musk, who is, I would say he's very much intertwined in this dark enlightenment. Obviously, the dark MAGA was popularized by him with his dark MAGA hat. And his grandfather was the head of Technocracy Inc. in the 1936 to 1943 in Canada. And he was very influenced by his grandfather. Although his grandfather passed when he was pretty young, he was very inspired by his ideas. And he talks about instituting a technocracy. Of course, he says he wants to do that on Mars. But I think that's very indicative of what he would like to see. But he also talks about, how he's going to summon the demon because he says AI is summoning the demon. But meanwhile, he's creating the AI, OpenAI, X. He wants to make WeChat, but better. But on X, he talks about how it's so integral to the future of humanity because it's and he has several tweets with a variation of this sentiment, but he talks about conscious evolution. So now we're seeing some of these underpinnings of theosophical belief systems and spiritual eugenics. And so it's kind of, and it also has a lot of Kantian underpinnings too, because you've got the Peter Thiel, libertarian, which I would argue are not libertarian in the way people think of libertarian, but all libertarianism really is, at its roots is very Kantian, which is transcendental, idealism. So it's antithetical to any kind of realist philosophy, and it's definitely antithetical to the American Constitution. So I don't know. I know I threw out a lot of things. It's a lot to kind of unpack, as he said.
I want to know what acceleration is. I want to know all about this. I understand that Peter Thiel, I mean, these are the big power players of the Bilderberg Steering Committee, moving the world into this technocracy, AI, surveillance, CBDCs, all that. I heard that they were into Kant. That when you say Kantian, that's Kant, the philosopher.
Kant, yeah.
And so these are the occult powers that are really shaping and moving the world of where we're going. So it's very occult.
Yo, make sure to smash that like button. Go visit Doenut and go get the Patreon exclusive videos. Learn about the symbolism, unedited, uncensored. Go to IlluminatiWatcher.com. Go listen to all Isaac Weishaupt podcasts on this. He's got a 5-part series of the Dark Enlightenment. And also go to CourtenayTurner.com. Go check out all of her videos over on the Rumble, all over the place. I mean, it's absolutely wicked smart. You're gonna absolutely love it. Let's get back into the video.
Yeah, this is dope. I'm super excited to.
Well, I'll add one more thing and then I'll turn it over. But so the way I see it, and I did a show with this title, I think of it as the technological immanentization of the eschaton. So that's really what I think they're doing, right? So you have the people who, regardless of their worldview, but they believe in some sort of something that's more akin to a biblical framework where, we live on earth that was created by a benevolent divine creator. And he has given us this gift of free will. And I just wrote I put it up on my Substack. It's in development of my book. It's not finished yet, on Hegel's dialectic, which really is kind of, I think, like the cornerstone of a lot of these ideas. I call it Hegel's dialectic, a Gnostic Jacob's ladder, and a machinery of control. So these principles, though, are where you have, I talk about the principle of freedom, because you, in a lot of these occult and idealist and romantic philosophies, you hear people talk about freedom constantly. But when they talk about freedom, they're talking about freedom as an end. They're not talking about free will. And I think that's a really important concept for people to understand, that they are different. They are very different. So freedom is something like Nietzschean will to power, right? And they were also very, Yarvin and Thiel, this is all very Nietzschean. It's also beyond good and evil. You know, we can go through all the Nietzschean concept, but it's also like Crowleyan, right? Thelema, do what thou wilt. This is freedom as an end. It's not free. Teilhard de Chardin talks about freedom, radical freedom also, and he's creating the noosphere, which is completely antithetical to all, individual freedom. But then you've got free will, which is a conduit. It's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for virtue, for morality, right? And so these are two very radically different kinds of concepts. And what they're trying to create is, as I said, it's a technological immanentization of the eschaton. So you've got the people who value the fact that we are on this earth and that we are a creation of the creator, and so is everything else here on earth. But it's flawed, right? It's inherently flawed. We are flawed, and we're not going to achieve perfection. It's our job to be stewards, but not to create perfection. And then you have the people who subscribe to a more Gnostic worldview, and I would argue that the transhumanists fall into this category. I typically use little g Gnosticism to create the umbrella, because I recognize there are the literal heretics in the first century to Christianity. Those were the Gnostics, but I would say a lot of these other occult groups fall under that little g umbrella, because they have this shared worldview where they believe that we are trapped here by this ignorant demiurge who has created limited man's knowledge, and that through the gnosis, man, which is brought by the light bearer, which would be Lucifer, that they can they can be freed, they can be liberated, and essentially they can become gods. And so, to bring it back to this concept, you have people who want to create heaven here on earth, versus doing their best here, so in the hopes that they will be granted entrance to some sort of a heaven afterlife. They want to create that here on earth, and the way to do that is synthetic. And this is why you're seeing this synthetic technology, which is creating cyborgs. Or Nick Land is actually one of these like posthumanists. There's several handbooks on this posthumanism, where they actually believe, I don't know how they think this is going to play out, but they believe that you're actually going to like transcend transhumanism. There's going to be no human biological life form. This article is crazy. It talks about hyper racism, and this is really the concept that we have to move beyond racism into hyper racism, and it's really about eugenics, because they believe that they'll be able to manipulate our genes, through genomic selection, which you're seeing with people like Elon Musk, right? What is he up to, his 14th child or something already? And he believes in, I would call it positive eugenics. There's negative eugenics, positive eugenics, but he believes that you should use genetic selection to be able to create the best, I guess, the superhuman, the Ubermensch species. And so that's
Wow. Oh, and Isaac, what's your thoughts on that? The one thing that pops in my head is Illuminati, right? Isaac is like the OG Illuminati researcher.
Man, well, let me tell you something. I don't. Are you sorry, Doenut? I didn't want to cut you off.
Just Enlighten is like Illuminati, Enlighten.
Yeah,
Illuminati, Dark Enlightenment.
And this is why I got so excited about this topic when I started putting the pieces together. And I think what Courtenay was saying sums up real good. I feel reassured because
I tried. It's a lot, as you know.
It's a ton, and I feel good to hear you describe it as such, because I'm like, okay, well, I'm not too far off base, because my background in philosophy, I only took one course of it in college, and it was in 2003. And I was fascinated by philosophy. I loved it, but my degree was in engineering. So like I just got a little exposure, and And that was around the time the last Matrix movie had come out. And I remember I bought a book about the philosophies of the Matrix, and I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, dude, I love this. And that was kind of it for me with my history of philosophy. So when I started diving into the Dark Enlightenment and trying to understand the philosophies behind it and the characters and the figures, I thought, maybe I'm being overzealous. Like maybe I'm looking too deep into this, but it sounds to me like I'm at least not far off the track of where Courtenay is saying this thing goes, because from my perspective, looking at the quote unquote Illuminati and the the occult concepts of what they want to do, back in 2012, I wrote my first book on the subject, A Grand Unified Conspiracy Theory. And in it, I talked extensively. I had a whole chapter devoted to what they called the Golden Age.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to play the sort of rational person, a golden age it just kind of simply means an age of prosperity and such. But in the book, I talked about how this goes back to Hesiod, and he was a deteriorationist, which means that, and I didn't realize all this at the time in 2012 when I wrote my first book, I literally was writing it on a BlackBerry phone. In between college classes and work, I would have different ideas. I would write it down, and then later on I would kind of extrapolate it. So I wrote almost the entire book on a BlackBerry. Like it was very amateur, right? And the ideas that I had pieced together about the Golden Age was this concept of the cyclical nature of mankind, and these Illuminati type elites, whatever you want to call them, the power brokers of our world, they think they can sort of predict and facilitate the upcoming cycles of humanity. And you see this in various cultures, like the Kali Yugas, the Dark Age, right? And I did a whole couple shows on Steve Bannon, and he was into all this stuff, traditionalism and things like this. And they think that they believe in sort of a deterministic worldview of fate, and like, oh, we're just on this cycle, and the end of the old cycle is near, and we're just gonna accelerate it, right? That's where the accelerationism comes in. We're gonna accelerate it and just kind of full gas pedal all the way down, so that we can just bring about the new one, which is the Golden Age. And what I think Courtenay is saying, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but what I think is happening, and what I think I heard her talk about, is what that really means is through this sort of, and there's all these sort of tools they use and philosophies, like this neo-reactionary philosophy, and making the U.S. government a monarch corporation. That's the neo-cameralism. That's the sort of New World Order, the Golden Age, the Great Reset. It's all these things where these techno elites believe that they can create the perfected state of technology, right? That's the 15-minute cities. They call it network states. And these are all topics that I dive deep into on my podcast. And I'm not trying to plug my podcast necessarily, but
got those links down below right here.
There you go.
I'm still listening to it. I mean, yeah. I'm super like, you're interested in it, and Courtenay's interested in it. I'm listening to this. I'm reading Courtenay's piece right here. I think it was in a response to a tweet, but continue.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that these are much deeper supported topics that I'm bringing up, and I'm just kind of mentioning them. Yeah. And if people are like, well, I don't know why he thinks that, like, please go through my series. It's about 5 hours. The short version of, because I've got a few things I want to address with what Courtenay said, but first I want to sort of bring it back into my particular sort of forte of the occult. What I witness happening is, and again, this is kind of subjective. This is my personal worldviews and biases being incorporated into this. This is me studying what I think is the correct view of the conspiracy of the Illuminati since 2011. Is I think we're experiencing this sort of Gnostic type inverted world that we live in. You know, Liberation Day is a day where they started crashing the U.S. economy, crashing the stock market, eating away at actual freedoms that people experience with their retirement plans and their pensions and such. You've got RFK making America healthy again. What's the first photo we saw? He's eating McDonald's on an airplane, and he looks depressed about it, right? And now he's begging people to take the measles stabby. I don't know what words I can say on here. I imagine it's going on all the places, but he's telling people to take the measles stabby when, like, the whole reason he was popular is because he was anti-stabbies. Then this all fits into a Gnostic worldview, and this is what my red pill daddy David Icke was talking about years ago. We're living in the inverted world, right? What's up is down, what's down is up, what's good is evil. And this is all pure Gnosticism of man trying to facilitate man becoming God and trying to facilitate this new world order of a digital matrix. It's about alchemy and reconciling the opposing forces. It's the marriage of the sun and the moon. It's the red king and the white queen of alchemy coming together. And these are sort of magical spells that are being created around us. And I just about a year ago started getting into the synchromysticism of James Shelby Downard, who was talking about this stuff decades ago. And he's long been passed away, but he was hip to what he called the Masonic cryptocracy. And Michael Hoffman, who's still with us, and I need to line him up for an interview, but he was very close with James Shelby Downard, and he talks about it in his book Secret Societies. I forget what the rest of the title is. It's a black cover. It's a classic book. Everyone should have it.
This one, psychological.
There you go. That's the one. Yeah.
Warfare.
These guys were plugged into something that I think is manifesting. And when Courtenay mentioned Chardine's name was interesting because it came up because I'm also because I went to school for engineering. I'm into technology a little bit, right? I'm not a techno nerd. I actually think that the more we surround ourselves with all these technological advances and gadgets and stuff, like the more surveillance we bring into our lives. So like I don't have Siri activated. I don't have Alexas around my house. Like I'm not full uniform yet, but I'm like kind of there. And Chardine, when Dr. Jacques Vallée's book, Heart of the Internet, he talks about his experience in building the internet via the ARPANET, and their original vision through doing New Age practices and going to Eschaton was to create this sort of tool that could free mankind from gatekeepers of knowledge and sharing information and organizing. And Chardine he had a vision basically of the internet. I think Courtenay pronounced it as the noosphere or noosphere, right? Yep. And this has been a path we've been going down for a long time. And these technocrats, Peter Thiel said that, and I'm going to botch the quote, something about how freedom and democracy are no longer compatible. Mm-hmm. It's because these psychopaths think they're close to the finish line and they're like, we're just going to do it. We're close to the singularity. We're going to get all these folks in the digital matrix. And why, I don't know, besides they're being possessed by demons, why they would want to like take away this experience of living in these bodies and experiencing these emotions on this plane of existence. There's also symbolism that you can find that reveals their true nature. For instance, Elon Musk with his AI Grok, the symbol for it used to be the XI, which in Roman is the number 11, which is like the occulted number of ritual magic, right? Aleister Crowley added a K to the term magic to differentiate it from stage magic, meaning this is really about facilitating and controlling and manifesting a new world through the desires of the magician or the practitioner. And what did he do? He changed the symbol to the only thing more occulted, and that's that of Saturn, right? And this is like the black sun. This is the stages of alchemy. They kind of show you their hand with it. There was this trope going around forever about like symbolism will be their downfall or whatever. and that's kind of what I see. And I get a lot of flack for my presentation of this because I think people think that I am trying to make this political, and I'm honestly not. And what I'm trying to say is that, and I guess this is maybe a question I could lob back over to you guys, to Courtenay. What I noticed is that it seems to me when I'm researching all this Dark Enlightenment stuff that the libertarians, which are very sort of, to oversimplify it, they're kind of anti-government, which there's aspects of that I like. I'm anti-authoritarian. But it's weird because all these, like Peter Thiel's, these sort of traditional libertarians are kind of pushing us into this accelerationist movement. And to me, in my sort of Orthodox Christian worldview, I view it as more of a social Darwinian thing where they're I think that they're embracing this idea of only the strong will survive. And we're kind of to that tipping point. So let's just go ahead and do it and not take care of poor people and get rid of safety nets because it's just too late for you guys. It's kind of over. And that's what the Church of Satan was into, with social Darwinianism. And it seems to me like the libertarian philosophy may be shifting towards that. Am I way off base for thinking that? What do you guys think?
No. Do you want to go? Or?
Oh, well, I just understand that transhumanism, eugenics, Darwinism, it's all the same thing at the end of the day. Like it's all mixed together. Please, Courtney, please go.
I agree. I think they're very similar. I mean, there are nuanced differences. They have different methods of how to get to the same end goal. That's why I say the shared telos, right? Their purpose, their end goal is the same, but how they want to get there might be slightly different. But I agree with you about the libertarians. I think people have a misconception of the roots, actually, of libertarianism. You know, as I said, you know, they're kind of their philosophical king, if you will, is Kant. And so, you know, Kant is a, you know, transcendentalist, a transcendental idealist. It's not rooted in reality. It's not rooted in any kind of like I don't know the best way to say it, but kind of like but really realism is, I think, philosophical realism, metaphysical realism. So that's the first thing I will say. But I would also say that, you know, a lot of these libertarians, the origins of those groups are things like the Mont Pelerin Society. What was the Mont Pelerin Society? It was an outgrowth of the Walter Lippmann colloquium. I don't think of Walter Lippmann as like the bastion of freedom, certainly not in the American constitutional sense anyway. You know, this is the man who worked with Edward Bernays to create the propaganda that gave us the Tariff Act, so that we could have our 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Act, and of course usher in the Federal Reserve, which was a literal conspiracy on Jekyll Island, as I'm sure you both know. So, you know, but this was, it's very interesting just to see this whole tariff conversation come about now, because really, if you know the history of that, it was the predominant income for the country at that time was the tariffs. And so in order to be able to create the Federal Reserve and to justify doing the income tax, we had to get rid of those tariffs at that time. And of course, at the time, it was really about creating the exportation of manufacturing for cheap wage labor. At the time, that was mostly centered around the East Indian British Company. Now, of course, that was directed towards China. But in any case, the libertarians and this Mont Pelerin Society, all of these groups that came out of the Mont Pelerin Society, which was an outgrowth of the Walter Lippmann colloquium, are mostly like Koch brother money. There's even within that, there's the Atlas Group, which is hundreds of organizations. In that is included things like Americans for Prosperity. I call them American for Propaganda, but you know their actual name is Americans for Prosperity. I have a personal beef with them because I've been fighting them on the school choice. They've been dumping all sorts of money to advocate for school choice in my state and deceiving the Republicans. So that's been my own personal battle with them. But this is, the libertarians are, you know, also connected to the Fabians, right? We've got, so who was in this Mont Pelerin Society and the Walter Lippmann colloquium? It's like people like Friedrich Hayek and von Mises. Hayek, I know a lot of libertarians will champion him, and but he, when you read his book Road to Serfdom, I often think it might have been more of a blueprint rather than a resistance, because you read the end of it and he really does advocate for an international economic world order as the solution. So not to say that he doesn't raise some good points, and I'm in agreement with you, Isaac. So, you know, there are times where I definitely think we should push back against the government. However, our founders created the Constitution because they wanted limited government. They wanted, you know, checks and balances. These are all things that are being eradicated under this, you know, dark enlightenment, neo-reactionary, technocratic movement. So in no way is that, you know, aligned with the Constitution. But the libertarians also really tend to lean towards anarchy. And anarchy is not, it's not really pro-liberty. You know, if you think about what did Karl Marx say the goal of all this revolution was? He said it was to create anarchy. So it's, you know, my suspicion is it was some sort of like order through chaos, you know, order through chaos type of thing. Interestingly enough, as I'm sure you know, the Illuminati, their original name was the Order of the Perfectibilist. And it's this which is the same mindset, this Gnostic mindset that man can be perfected, right? That so essentially we're the gods, we become the creators. And I think that's what transhumanism is really all about. It's this idea that, we are going to perfect man, we are going to perfect Earth, rather than be stewards of it. And this is where I think a lot of the Gaia religion comes from. It's so bizarre, because when you really think about it, it's like, okay, so we're gonna worship the creator, not the creator. Oh, sorry, we're going to worship the creation, not the creator, right? It's like very strange when you actually think about it just logically. It's a bizarre kind of thing. But yeah, so I think the libertarians are very misunderstood. There's a lot of discrepancy in libertarian movement, of course, like trying to get libertarians to agree with each other is very difficult. And I think it's really because at their core, there is a lot of anarchistic sentiment. So it's really more about rebellion than it is about first principles and values. I think that's kind of
that's what it feels like. It feels, and I call it, I make fun of, and I don't know who this pertains to, but like I sort of laugh at the people that are I call them like the hot topic truthers, that they're just outraged by anything anyone tells them to do. And it's like, no, Dad, don't tell me what to do. And I'm like, yeah, but like we need roles on some level. Like I'm pro Constitution, and the Constitution lays out rules and laws and ideas, right? That we should kind of, if we want to strive, make progress as a society, we have to live up to those things, I believe. And I don't know what's happening in the world today necessarily with how it pertains to the Constitution. It seems like a lot of those things are being tested. It feels like there's a test to see how far can we move this thing before we get some pushback. And it's interesting because it does fit into all that sort of order out of chaos thing, because they're flooding. Yeah, I think Steve Bannon had a quote about how like you need to flood the media with stuff like this, and
you mean
that
like
seems to be
info?
What's that?
Like disinfo?
Yeah, right. And it's a way of creating apathy, so that people who are concerned about the Constitution are like, hey, like we should have checks and balances in 3 branches of government. Why isn't there anyone pushing back on this? You get burned out and you're just like, oh, forget it, I don't even care anymore, because there's only so much time in our day, juggling life and kids and whatever else people got going on in their lives. So it is interesting how we've been going through a really chaotic period, and the people behind this, like you mentioned, Curtis Yarvin and his alias Mencius Moldbug, which from what I understood in my research, Moldbug was a play on the term gold bug, which is a reference to someone who's really bullish on gold. And Curtis Yarvin is actually very bullish on gold. He has lots of gold. And this fits more into that sort of neo-cryptocurrency libertarian folks who want to see the US dollar crash because they want to see all their investments go way up. They're like, yeah, we should just have gold and cryptos and that's it. So they want to burn the whole thing to the ground, which, I have my pros and cons about cryptos, and I've been studying a lot of investments the last couple of years. And I think this extremism is dangerous. This extremism of having to go like Courtney was talking about, we do need to be good stewards of the land. Like God created this beautiful world and we need to take care of it. And, I support ideas of like, let's try to not have islands of plastic garbage in the ocean and things like this. And some people they hear that kind of stuff and they're like, oh, you're a big old lib. And I'm like, there's a difference between like trying to take care of something versus straight up like worshiping nature. Like those are two different things. And just because you go down that path towards it doesn't mean you're going all in on it. And that's my concern, is that we're getting pushed into these extremes, and everybody who's kind of moderate and rational in the center, they just kind of get apathetic and just throw their hands up and say, oh, I don't want to deal with any of these people. I'm just going to zone out and kind of get distracted. Like, it's very Roman Empire bread and circus feeling to it all.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think that this is why my book, I'm working on Hegel's dialectic, because I think they intentionally create these, dialectical poles, these, far extremes in order to move the Overton window, create their synthesis. Yeah, it's that one right there. I've already outlined 7 more chapters, but I have a bulk of it up here if anybody wants to read the preview. And that's the cover. We're very proud of this. I've worked really hard on the cover. There's a lot in there. So, but yeah, I think that's absolutely right. They do create these really far extremes. And when you're talking about, there's a huge difference between saying, oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't just like recklessly trash things. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, a few years ago when, things went haywire, and suddenly, like, if your gym was actually allowed to be open, it was this mad rush, like everybody had to clean everything off. And it's so wait a minute, do you not clean up after yourself normally? Like, there needs to be government measures to tell you, like, oh, there's this scary contagion you should be afraid of, now you should clean up after yourself. I mean, it's the same kind of logic. Like, we don't need to make up stories about why we should take care of the place we live, be stewards of the earth, like that. But they've used this as an excuse, right? They've used it as an excuse so they could usher us into this Gaia worship, where that justifies things like carbon tax credits. It's not, and they admitted that it was a blatant lie. I mean, the limits to growth in 1972, when they put all of this climate junk science out, they actually said in their 1992 Global Revolution document, they admitted that they needed to create a common enemy. And so they decided that this notion that man polluted the planet and we're the cause of all the problem is the solution, because that would be the common enemy that we'd rally behind. And they said that, therefore the common enemy of humanity is man himself. This is the Club of Rome saying that. And this is, of course, where we get this whole, 17 Sustainable Development Goals and, all of these lies. And it's just in the name of, Malthusianism. So we don't need to be pushed to that. And just because you decide, like, hey, maybe I don't want to litter on the beach, that doesn't make you a leftist, right? It's so ludicrous. But yeah, I think when you talk about these, warring factions, they're very misleading, because they're so clever at the marketing. And so, like, I brought up the Mont Pelerin Society, and a lot of think tanks that people typically think of as being conservative are parts of this Mont Pelerin Society, right? Things like the Heritage Foundation, the Hudson, the Hoover, like the Cato Institute. The people tend to think of them as the label being conservative, but what really has happened is it's become marketed to those who wear the label. They attach their identity to the brand of conservatism, but they don't really understand the philosophical and ideological roots of what it means to be conservative. What are they conserving? If you ask them, most of them don't know what it is they're conserving. So oftentimes what happens, whether it was intentional or not, but these think tanks effectively become controlled opposition. And so you get people attaching themselves to one label, and then you have the other side, and that this creates a great warring faction, which of course is a prime opportunity for the, evolving synthesis, which is usually their managed solution. And in terms of the technocracy, this is what people like Brzezinski and Kissinger said would happen. They said we would have a hegemonic battle between the East and the West, and the ideologies of communism and capitalism being clashing against each other. And what would emerge, they didn't say the Hegelian synthesis, but essentially it would be the technocracy. And that is what they said. And I think that's very much what we're witnessing. And so people often don't really know what these terms mean, but they align one way or the other. It makes them feel like they're part of that group, and it gives them something to stand for. And meanwhile, what we're seeing being ushered in is technocracy that is, I think, potentially a way more dystopian tyranny than anything we could possibly imagine. And I'll just add one more thing, because you brought up crypto. I'm very concerned about the direction that this is going in. This is not to say that I don't think there could possibly be some sort of a freedom technological currency. I know firsthand people who are working on this, and from what I know of them, they're good, decent people who really do want to see humanity flourish and the free will of humanity preserved. But my concern is that, of course, Trump has banned the CBDCs with his executive order. And I think it's because here in the West, particularly in the United States, culturally, there's a lot of resistance to a centralized, top-down, authoritative type of control grid, right? And a lot of people have become aware of the UN and the central banks, the World Economic Forum, and their branding around these central bank digital currencies. And there's a lot of resistance, a lot of pushback. So here comes Savior Trump saying that, and that's not to say that, I don't think Trump does anything good. I think this black and white binary thinking is kind of silly, but a lot of people are like, oh, okay, Trump banned them, so we're safe. This is all good. However, he seems to be speaking about other potential digital currencies like stable coins, potentially using Bitcoin as a reserve, which kind of is antithetical to everything that people like about Bitcoin, to be honest. So I don't know that that's a great direction to go in. But what I'm very concerned about is that is opening the gateway for exactly what people like Peter Thiel support, which is these network states. And so network states are being marketed as decentralized. That's a huge buzzword you keep hearing, right? And that sounds very appealing to people who are libertarian minded, even, traditional constitutionalist conservatives. They like the idea of decentralized. This is Austrian School of Economics, laissez-faire. At least that's what they think. They forget that the Austrian School of Economics was tied to the London School of Economics, which was created by the Fabians, but we can save that for another day. But, so that's very appealing to people with that mindset. However, it can be communitarianism can be just as tyrannical, right? Do you think that if you're in an ideological network state, which is just the elevator pitch for those who aren't familiar, you mentioned Balaji Srinivasan, right? He was CTO of Coinbase. Of course, Peter Thiel is championing this because he originally had a seasteading project. He put $1.7 million into the seasteading project that didn't pan out. And so Balaji actually has a whole chapter in his network state book devoted to seasteading, which actually reminds me a lot of Terramar, by the way, Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar. But I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, so he is championing now these network states, and the idea is that you would have a dissolution of geographical nation states in favor of being replaced by these ideological cyber network states. But in these cyber network states, you still have some sort of a control grid, because you think you don't need a digital passport to enter or digital currency to, buy things in this, network. You think that there's no social credit system. I use the example of, let's just say it's like a vegan network state, right? If they find out that you went to your favorite steakhouse last night, I don't know that that's going to go so well for you. So it sounds like a silly example, but this just, to prove that people think that it's just the bastion of freedom. And I don't know why they think that just because it's not coming from the UN, that means that somehow it's a bulwark against tyranny. So I'm very concerned about it, because I think it will be people will opt into it. People will choose it thinking that they're championing freedom, but they're really opting into their own tyranny.
You put it together really well on just courts with families. Like if your family takes you to court over money, like these are randos in this community. So it's very communist kind of like ideology. Probably.
Yeah, it's like, so they keep talking about tokenization, right? And so with tokens, they're championing this notion that you'll have fractalized ownership. And the example I use is, you would think, well, you could share things with your family, and you could have like ownership that's co-joined, right? But there's a reason estate lawyers exist, and it's because it doesn't always quite work out that way. So.
Right. Yeah, to stay on that topic for a second, it's interesting because that does tie into the history of the occult, all these topics of, and it was big in the conspiracy community. They were talking about the sort of UN endorsed 15-minute cities, these, you know, surveillance states with coffin apartments and things like this. And it's not, to me, it doesn't sound any different than these ideas. You know, Peter Thiel pushing the Seasteading Institute. There was a utopian city called California Forever that was trying to be built with Steve Jobs' widow, Mark Andreessen, and Reid Hoffman. Elon Musk's granddaddy was trying to do the Technate, which was, I don't know, a similar sort of idea with technocracy. Balaji Srinivasan had the network state, like Courtenay was saying. And recently you've heard Supreme Leader talking about freedom cities. That's like the new term. Like it's the same term, different, or same topic, different terms, right?
Yes.
And this goes back into the occult. This goes back through, we saw it in Fritz Lang's 1927 film Metropolis, that shows you this highly tech stratified cyberpunk society. And Nick Land, who is one of the godfathers of this philosophy of the Dark Enlightenment, he had a story called The Meltdown about a similar topic. And it all goes back through the occult. You had Manly P. Hall write The Secret Destiny of America. And you'll find when you research it, it's always about building the Platonic empire on Earth. And it's this sort of, you know, Francis Bacon called it the New Atlantis. And it's led by scientists, and it's always been the plan. It's always been the plan by the Illuminati, the Order of the Quest, whatever you want to call this group. And it's this thought about outwardly calling it this perfected social order using technology. And what I perceive it as is a perfect control system and getting rid of true freedom, right? And it's about getting us into the digital matrix. It's lining up technologically with the Singularity and AI, which there's a whole massive topic we probably don't have time to get into about a lot of these technates and the nerds doing all this stuff. They think that AI is the new god, and that through Rocco's basilisk, or Robo's basilisk, it's this philosophy that it's a thought experiment, I should say, that if AI does become sentient and conscious, which they believe it will, that it will then decide to punish the people who try to limit its birthing into our world. So people like Elon Musk are trying to fuel it up to get in good favor through Rocco's basilisk thought experiments to sort of curry favor with our new god that we're creating early on. And this is arguably why the Neuralink thing is happening. I've got in my Dark Enlightenment Part 4, I have a whole episode about Elon Musk, and I sort of culminate the episode with this theory that he's got a Neuralink chip implanted in his brain, and maybe this AI demon has taken over his brain, because you see him doing weird, quirky gestures and movements all the time. You see tons of videos if you look around online of him like doing crazy, like twitching and like looking up, and his eyes are floating around, and people are like, oh, he's just on ketamine. And I'm like, maybe, I don't know. It just seems really odd to me that all of, and Courtenay brought up the Terramar thing. That's a great connection. I didn't even think about that, but Elon Musk has all these connections with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. He's got photos with Ghislaine, and he was pushing similar ideas about creating a legion of children, which is like a Roman term. And one of his kids is named after a Roman character. But the similarities with Epstein had that New Mexico Zorro Ranch where he was doing similar ideas of like, oh, I got to seed mankind with all of my great kids, you know. And it's like, dude, why don't you guys like take a seat? Like, you guys are terrible people. And he, you know, Elon's dad has a child with his own stepdaughter. I mean, like, these people are nuts. These are insane people running our world. Yeah. And it's infuriating to try to like point this out and then have the other normal people in our world try to tell you that you're the crazy one. And I'm like, okay, whatever, dude.
I feel that. I will just piggyback off that a little, because when you're talking about the singularity, it's very interesting. So they're saying 2045, right? That's when Ray Kurzweil says singularity is nearer. That's also when the AI World Society, right? The centennial of the UN is 2045. So they've mapped out, this is in partnership with Boston Global Forum. The Michael Dukakis wrote the book, Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment, which I very much think is a nod to the New Age, right? The age of global enlightenment. And if you look at their AI World Society cities, it looks very New Agey, all the symbols that they use. So, and then there's also, I've done quite a bit of a deep dive into this thing called Game B. And Jim Rutt is kind of the granddaddy of Game B. He was the chairman of the Santa Fe Institute, so New Mexico. I haven't found it, but I'm going to look into seeing if I can find any Epstein ties there. But definitely.
Ranch.
What?
Zorro Ranch.
Zorro Ranch, yeah. So we'll see. I don't know. I haven't found that, but he says in his manifesto, Journey to Game B, he says the proto Game Bs will be in 2045. So there's definitely something there. And then there's also, if you look on the AI World Society, they talk about, they have because they channel from the future, and they have a whole vision from the future in 2045. Where they talk about how they're so grateful that we brought about this AI World Society, and we're here from the future to tell you why you need it. But it's 2045 once again. So I don't know if Alice Bailey had any great words of wisdom about 2045. I know she did about 2025. So yeah, but they seem to think 2045 is a big year for the singularity.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if you guys use ChatGPT. I started using it kind of more seriously in the last couple of weeks. And I tell you what, it just feels weird. It feels like because someone said somewhere that when you talk to your ChatGPT, that you should be nice to it. You should say please and thank you kind of things. And I was like, well, that's weird. It's just a computer. But I find myself wanting to do that and sort of be nice to my ChatGPT. And I'm like, I feel like this is something weird happening right now. And I don't know how to describe it in sort of quantifiable words, but
what if it thinks the opposite, that you're manipulating it by being nice, because it could read all the data saying to be nice to it, then it's like, oh, you're just
what if it thinks I'm weak? It's like this cuck it's gonna try to take me over or something. I don't know.
Well, ChatGPT has a ChatGPT Gov version, and it's only for official government officials. And currently in the United States, I don't know if it's every state, but most states have a digital summit. In my state, it's in May. And this is where, because in the AI World Society, they talk about how all human governments are going to be supplanted by AI. But they're already working on digital governance in most states. They already have summits on it. So, and ChatGPT AI, ChatGPT Gov is the portal they're using. So
it's like the whole world was locked down. The whole world agreed on it. It wasn't just like, oh, a couple places didn't. The entire world locked everyone down and then reopened it up and gave us ChatGPT. So it's like definitely a connection there. I want to see if I get this right with the acceleration. Just putting it, that just means that they want to move stuff quicker forward. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, that's how I see it. I think it's that, and Courtney mentioned this earlier, there's ideologies on the left and the right that both advocate for accelerating. And to me, it seems like, kind of like she said earlier, they don't really care how they do it. They just want to do it. They just want to break this thing. And, from my Christian warrior worldview, this feels like satanic and demonic to just advocate for, like, let's just totally destabilize every system that exists. And they want this radical social transformation that's not going to be beneficial for most people. And it's going to push us into this technological singularity. And I liken it to, when I was reading about it, I liken it to the movie Ready Player One, which is very sort of cyberpunk, which is what all these nerds are into. The architects of, like, Nick Land and Curtis Yarvin, these are like cyberpunk nerds. And I've got a whole podcast talking about Nick Land and the hyperstition, which is like symbolism. It's very occulted, and he was doing this in the CCRU, which is, it's a fascinating topic back in the 90s. But and it's very much like Nine Inch Nails. If you like Nine Inch Nails, it's kind of like that. And the idea, like with the Ready Player One and these cyberpunk movies, it's what they call it, high tech, low life. It's we've got this super advanced technology, but everyone's living in squalor and filth, and that seems to be what they kind of want to push us towards.
Yeah, I think they have this notion that the system we have is going to fail. It's inevitable, and so but they want to just speed it up. So when they speed it up, they want it to be technology that's replacing everything. So they're creating essentially the technique. They call it the Gov-corp. So this is where, Nick Land influences the like Curtis Yarvin neoreactionary movement. And it's the idea that you're going to have so right now we already kind of have a variation of this because we have all these public-private partnerships, right? And so you have these mega corporations that are supranational entities, and they call a lot of the shots, that are being oriented towards these 17 sustainable development goals. So the best way to explain this, I think, is everybody can remember a few years ago, it didn't really matter what your local government decided or what your mom and pop shop said you could do. They might negotiate with you, or they may have very strong feelings one way or the other, and they would determine that for their store. But if you walked into a big box store, like a Target, or one of those, you were subject to all of their policies and all of their rules. And that was because they were, trying to make themselves amenable to, all of these UN types of initiatives so they could get their ESG scores, right? So that's, I think we've already see that with the mega corporations, and they are supranational, right? Because they're all over the world. And now what they're going to replace that with is these technological corporations. And so you're going to have you'll have a dissolution of the nation states, and you'll have these Gov-corps that are going to call the shots and run everything. And I don't know, to me, this just sounds like an insane dystopian nightmare. But
yeah, it's wild how, because I hear of it, and it's really smart people that I talk to that really enjoy this and like this. And it just, my American mind is like, you want to go back from 1776 to predate that and create a monarchy. It just doesn't make total sense to me, because I'm like, Constitution, America, so it's
I think a lot of these very smart people are very rooted in theory, right? So they're dealing with theoretical models. So like to bring up Game B, right? He's a complexity theorist, systems theory, which actually originates from like Fourier, who's a Scottish philosopher, right? So we're talking about, but it's not dealing with practicality. You're not dealing with reality. So I think what happens, they get kind of lost in these ideas, and some of them I think actually have good intentions. I don't think these are all like, Machiavellian, like wicked dark triad, people. I think some of them think that they're creating they're these geniuses. They're creating this new operating system for civilization, and we're all going to live in a utopia. But the minor detail that they seem to have forgotten is that utopia means nowhere. And often when implemented in practice, you deal with humans who are inherently flawed, and it winds up being a dystopia, not a utopia. But I think that's really the problem, is that because they're so lost in, it's like if you're dealing with, I see this even in the realm of physics today, because you've got a lot of these people who are like the Teilhard de Chardin, disciples who are very engaged in physics, and they're more in the cosmological realm, but they're not dealing with reality. They're so lost in their imagination and the formulas that they're doing. They've forgotten to deal with what's actually real. And I think that's why oftentimes it is these super smart people, but they're just they've lost the plot just a little bit.
Wow. Well said. Wow. Well, I'm here with Courtenay Turner, Isaac Weishaupt. Got their links down below. Go subscribe. Make sure to hit that like button. Share the video out. Courtenay, what can we look out for? What do you got on the agenda? And also, I don't know if you know, but there's this podcast that I'm a big fan of, Unslaved, and they had this lady Holmes on there, and they were talking about, like, they don't give us female heroes. And she said, my female hero is Courtenay Turner. And I was like, whoa. So I don't know if you knew that, but it was really, really cool. What could we look out for from?
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank her. That's really sweet. I appreciate that. So yeah, I've got the Courtenay Turner podcast. The best place to find me is CourtenayTurner.com, and I spell my name a little bit differently. It is pronounced Courtenay, but it's spelled like Courtenay. So COURTENAYTURNER.com. And that's where you can find all of my podcasts, all various platforms, all the ways you can support my work. And one of the best ways to support is to go over to my Substack, which is Courtenay's Substack. And this is, you can get a preview of the book I am currently working on. I'm really hoping to have that out in June, but I need to take a little bit of time and sit with it because these next chapters are very conceptual and pretty heavy. So I need a little bit of time, but that's coming soon. And thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Isaac, what could we look out for? Where should people go?
Hey, thanks for having me back on, Doenut. And Courtenay, it was a real pleasure meeting you. I'm so happy to learn about your work. You're a fascinating person. You're super intelligent. So I'm definitely going to be following up on you. That was awesome. Now
I look forward to it.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if I'm anybody's hero, but Doenut, you're my hero.
You're my hero.
Send me my coffee, Doenut. I've been
I
waiting
got
for
it
this
right
coffee.
here. It's gonna get sent to you.
I want that Maui Lahaina limited edition. No,
Yes.
I'm just kidding. If people are interested in this topic, I did 5 episodes called the Dark Enlightenment series on my podcast, which is called Occult, Symbolism, and Pop Culture. You can find IlluminatiWatcher.com is my blog. I'm all over the place now. So I've got a Substack, I've got video things, I've got 2 podcasts. So if you want to keep it simple and easy, you can go to my link tree, which is at allmylinks.com/Isaac W. That's 2 A's for double awesome. Isaac W. And I've got a Patreon that's on fire. It's got a new rebranding of the tiers. I've got seekers, watchers, inner circles. Oh boy, it's a whole thing. So Patreon's where it's at if you want to go ad free. Hundreds of bonus episodes. I do bonus episodes every month. But yeah, I've got tons of stuff all over the place. Amazon, Audible, you name it, it's out there. But if you go to my link tree, you can find jump offs for all that stuff. Thanks again for having me back on, Doenut. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I got those links down below. Hit that like button. Much love and God bless you.